Jocelyn mentioned about like, having a disability and stuff. Like for me, since I've been like have sort of problems in my whole life, I just feel like we also get treated differently than, than an able body or high up education person. Because I never been to college in my life. And I just feel like by taking that IQ test to get certain, services, it's kind of like, it made me feel like, kind of like, not dumb in a sense, but like, this is ridiculous just to get services. But I mean, I do understand what they're playing, but we shouldn't have to go through all that just to get a certain thing.
Yeah.
Get help.
I think that's a good point. I think it will change in time. And maybe some of this work we're doing, we can present some other solutions, right? Instead of an IQ test, what can we be doing?
Yeah.
Maybe more inclusive.
Well, I kind of feel the opposite. In a way, yeah, it's kind of stupid that, you have to get services just like and stuff, but it also helps them to know where you are. But then again, this is not always accurate. Yeah. Your IQ testing isn't your identity. But it's like, okay, so you're gonna give me services because my IQ is not even. I mean, even like you ask me questions that I don't even know. Half the questions, it's like why don't you ask me questions that I know?
Yeah.
Where you are.
Yeah, but in a way, it kind of helps them to know what kind of service you need.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's like it's a waste of time because like, well then I'm disabled. Why don't you just give me the services?
Right.
Exactly. Just give it to me. Why do you have to test my intelligence?
Right, and there are some people that might score really high in an IQ test, but benefit from getting some services. I think people who have that mental health diagnosis, that maybe can't filter what they say all the time. They could benefit from services too, but the IQ test is keeping them out of those services. So I think these are great conversations because I think we're all open in our views with each other. Like we're not necessarily fixed. We're here to learn and come up with some good solutions. So this is awesome.
It's just hard. I just think, I was thinking about that college professor. She has autism. Her name is Temple. Can't think of her last name, but or something. But she has a doctorate degree and she has autism. And that's like, what I heard was some people with autism are more so intelligent. And my brother is autistic and stuff, but he doesn't read as well, but he figures out things in his own way and stuff. So it's like everybody in autism is in each different levels. And plus I've been signing him up. I signed him up for an autistic group, and we met with them on second Fridays of the month. And it's like all of them have some of them are married and have kids, and some of them have college degrees. Some of them are. It varies, but it's like they're autistic and have autism, but then you don't just can you test them, and they score higher than whatever, like I don't know the IQ ratings, but score high, and it's like you're just basically turning them down and stuff. It's hard. It just doesn't make any sense to me, and it's probably somebody that has cerebral palsy. I think. Brittany, you remember Brent?
Who?
Brent. That was at the disability center. So he has cerebral palsy, and he has a master's degree. And it's like, if I can remember, he had a master's degree, but I can't remember. Yeah, but still, it's like, so as people with disabilities can't, it brings me back to my conversation. It's like, then what you mean, just when I'm educated, I still need help with, with certain things.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, it frustrates me. So you're just gonna give me an IQ testing, and then you're saying, oh, you're too smart. Oh, well, you're not getting any help.
Right.
And I'm gonna help somebody that has a lower IQ stuff. I'm gonna help them.
Right.
Screw you.
Because
Screw the person.
Right, because someone with an autism diagnosis, they might have a higher IQ, but be more challenged with communicating effectively, or their sensory experience is different. Where someone with CP, like you said, your friend who has a master's degree, I have a friend with CP who has a doctorate degree, and he's really smart. And when I was first starting this program, I was trying to figure out, well, is someone, if they have CP, does that, legally the definition of an intellectual or developmental disability, CP is included in that. But for our purposes of this program, it's really looking at people who maybe have more of a difficult time advocating for themselves because they're neurodiverse, right? Their brain and how it's wired is different, and doesn't make it a bad thing or a deficit. It could actually be a strength if they're put into the right setting. And yeah, it's, I'd be interested to learn more about that group that you said, where there's other people with autism and they're maybe supporting each other.
Yeah, they so my brother is not really, he doesn't, basically he turned off his internet. So it's just that, I wish he would be, could go on Meetup by himself, and he won't do it. So I would have to do it, and it just puts more work on me, but I'm trying to get him some friends. But then, so it's like he likes the group, but it's just that my brother's on another planet, basically.
Yeah. Well, you have good advocacy skills, so he can hopefully learn something from you about that, because, you mentioned your friends who went on to higher education. I think it's really important to point out that everyone's outcome can be different if they have the right tools to advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
Someone who is neurodiverse and their brain's wired differently, that's going to be more of a barrier or a challenge to advocate, because their ability to be socially effective in that interaction is challenged because of their sensory experience, their ability to communicate. And it's not to say someone can't work on those skills, but from the start, they might have a bigger obstacle to overcome. One of my dad's friends, he has polio, and he's been a water ski instructor his whole life, and he's taught Calvin Klein how to water ski and a couple other famous people, but he's never actually water skied himself.
Oh wow!
Because he has polio. And I just think that's really cool to show like what people can do if they have the advocacy tools. Because if you're lacking something, that might make some of your other senses stronger, right? Or I always heard this old edge, if you have one disease or illness, you'll live a long life. But if you have zero illnesses, you'll live a short life. And that's because you don't know what your weakness is or what you can be working on or the thing to look out for. Because everyone has weaknesses and strengths and talents. But we just have to not judge people from the start, right? Pursue confidence.
It's true.
In people.
That's really true. Because we judge some. I think the disability community judges each other. too.
Yeah, that's true. They do.
And it's like, so it's not like we come together or anything. It's that we judge each other, and it makes it harder. And I belong in like basically two communities, and it's like, well, LGBTQ, that's another community I'm a part of too, but it's also the disability community. Yeah, it's just, I feel that that disability, I mean, everybody's disability is different, and then we kind of like hurt each other, and and put each other down. So it's just like, if we all come together and just help each other, then we'll make a stronger community.
Yeah.
And so that's the tough part with it. It's hard to do that.
Yeah. And no one's safe from it too, from being judged. But if society and culture can change in the way we talk about and describe people, if we get a little bit more knowledge about that, I think then maybe people will start seeing that judgment as not based in biology, but it's really based in language and in our relationships and our social beings and how we perceive each other.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's just, people are we just have to figure out what's best for, like, with finding a job, finding your social clique, or your just your finding your way.
yeah, finding your people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Finding people that have maybe a shared experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I have friends that don't have disabilities, but I also have friends that do have disabilities. I feel like having somebody without disabilities is hard for me to get them to understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And they keep asking why. Well, I mean, I'm trying to explain to you, if you stop asking why.
Right. And I think if they had some other group that they identified with as a minority, that can kind of aid in the understanding. Because I think in these other research, we'll talk about, people who are Jewish and maybe how they're perceived and their beliefs and values by communities, and how we can just be a little bit more polite or respectful in how we use language and talk about people, and really putting culture first, and how to let people be more self-determined in their life. Yeah.
I also feel like with like family, it's hard to, like, sometimes for me, for my aunt, it's like she goes with all this saying that, to a post I posted basically like a couple of weeks ago. It had something to do about, I'm tired of being stuck in here and like looking at this wall behind me, basically. And she took it a whole nother way, but like it's hard, like from becoming a Black and disabled woman, it's hard for me to get her to understand where I was coming from. And it was whole different concept, but it's just one of those things, like getting even family to understand your disability and what you go through every day. It's hard to get them to understand, even though they're your family, and they should kind of know a little bit more than they do, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So hopefully as we progress through this series, we'll learn some other terms that are going to maybe be helpful to throw out to your family or your friends, that can maybe help them change their thinking a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I don't think people are really taught how to think today.
Yeah.
Because there's so much bias, and the media plays a big role in, giving us stereotypes and perceptions of what an experience is like. So
feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I know it. Yeah, same thing with my family too. It's especially with this my head stuff. So it's like, like was it last February? That they did a big dinner thing, and I had to leave the house for a couple hours, and I came back and they were still there. They're loud, and I was living in the basement, and I could hear them, and I tried to explain to them that. My mom was like, "Okay, we're not having any get-togethers at this house until you move out and stuff." So it's just like she's the only one that understands. Like if you have one person in your family that understands you, then they'll fight for you. Since I don't have that anymore,
Yeah.
so it's like my family they can attack on me, and it's hard. And then you have and it's like, so it's harder, and especially if you have one person that that will fight for you and try to fight for you, and then now you don't have that person anymore.
Yeah.
So it's just frustrating. It's frustrating that I'm by myself. So now I have to do this on my own now.
Yeah.
I got your back.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. You got my back. I'm just saying, well, my cousin, I have to say, my cousin in California too has my back too. But she's just not in the state. Because otherwise, if she was here, she'd probably beat most of my family up anyway. So.
Yeah.
But, so that's what she would do. She understands because she works with people. She actually works with people with takes care of people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Well, she understands me.
Right. Well, that's good because it's important to have that social cohesion, having that social network. But how do we foster that in the community? Outside our families, like your family, you're kind of stuck with them to a degree.
Yeah.
Right? So there's that cohesion that's maybe blood-based, but in a community or in a workplace, what is going to bring us together and like build that cohesion and those connections? And that's something we'll maybe talk about later is virtue signaling and how maybe people show that they're an ally based on their actions or show that they're a supporter, and how authentic is that and how effective is their support in what they do to advance whatever cause they're interested in, because are they signaling to build up their own self-worth, or do they have like a different intention behind that? Does the intention really matter? Does it really just the outcome of someone signaling? But I think if we have some sort of goal or objective, one thing that's really important to talk about is disability as a transition category, because you might find yourself identifying later in life. If you were to get into like a car accident, you maybe have a brain injury, right? So I think it's everyone's prerogative to be inclusive, because you may one day find yourself identifying with this community. So the more you can understand it now, we can advance some of these inclusive ideas.
I think people that should express themselves because they need to let them out. And then if you don't feel comfortable talking to your friends or your family about it, then you should actually consider going to therapy, because it actually, whatever you're feeling or something like that, then you feel like a weight just lifted off you. And then the therapist ain't going like, go and tell your family, oh, she said this about you or this or that and that.
Yeah, having that confidence in someone you can trust is really important. And I think therapy is good advice. And also, like, maybe just finding those friends or people that you can be open and honest with, because
Mm-hmm.
not every culture is going to be super open and supportive,
Right.
and allowing people to find their niche is, I
Mm-hmm.
think, really helpful to someone's growth. So there needs to be, like, tying this back to these tolerance guides for schools, like there needs to be some structure in place where people feel like they can disclose things about themselves without the fear of someone treating them differently because they know that. So I think that's called um, implicit bias, where they're kind of judging someone and treating them different because they have this information about them. Um, so yeah, this is important stuff to know. So let's maybe go through some of our reflections on this work and see if other things kind of come up on this topic of, you know, policies in schools, how they can be kind of more supportive and support that culture of social and emotional learning, and to kind of learn more about diversity in different cultures. So our first question was like, who's the most important character? I kind of said it was, you know, the victim, probably. There wasn't really a clear character, right? But what we did learn was when you're dealing with a crisis of discrimination, it's important not to re-injure the victim, or maybe disclose something about them that they don't want to be public. The most important action or consequence, that social emotional learning, I think that's so important to have opportunities for that, where, you know, the codes aren't so overreaching where there aren't any opportunities for people to learn and grow and to feel a little bit of uncomfort, because that's a part of education. But we don't want to, right? We want to give people the tools in order to speak up when they feel like they are hearing something that's biased. And it doesn't have to be personal, right? It doesn't have to be me, but maybe someone I know that wouldn't like that being said, and you're just standing up to that discrimination, right? If someone, you know, like you have like a gay brother or sister, right? And someone uses that as a negative slang language, right? You don't always have to make something personal, but there are like these learning opportunities, and if you can get someone to echo your calling something out, that's important. But doing it in a way, right, where people can learn. We kind of said to not assume or jump to conclusions.
I'll be right back.
Yeah. Right, how that can kind of fuel tensions more. So our next question is like, what's the role of the media? I think this one was a little bit more of a direct example, because I did have a lot of tips for the media. You know, if you are holding a press conference, if someone is discriminated against, to have like a separate entrance for the media, because everyone has a phone nowadays. If you have people coming in that aren't members of that community, they can see something or take something out of context. So that's why some of the instructions in this section talked about having phrases that you can say if you're answering a question that you don't want to answer, because it can be interpreted a different way, right? We're still collecting all of the details. give people a timeline. If you have a long statement, it can be taken out of context. So I think organizations need to have more media training just in today's age with everyone being able to post something online. There's a lot of bias, I think, in our online communities. I don't know if you have Facebook or, but you know, I tend to see like certain views amongst my friends that are more wide held, and I think if that's where you're getting your news for the day, you're getting just one view or one perspective. So having that diversity of viewpoints, I think, is really important.
Right. Because I'm thinking, you know, far as like, you know, it's just a student does need a voice, needs a voice. And but then you have to, I always wanted to say that, is it possible, like, certain things, I know if you have to report if you were about to kill yourself or you're about to harm somebody or something, but can it be like something that's like, you know, personal, like you're not ready to tell your parents about, but then like have somebody that you can run to and talk about? And it's just, that's important, because that actually, if I can say this, that it might help people that are suicidal, to talk about it and not ready to, you know, not ready to, you know, not tell them like I'm going to kill myself or something, but just tell them like, you know, what you're feeling, and then you don't have to report that to the parents, because it's not like, it's nothing that's going to like, you know, hurt you or anything. It's just, I don't know, and that's what I would like that for other people. I wonder if that will slow down the suicidal and the harm and all that stuff down.
Well, I think we need to have safe spaces for people, where the term safe space, I think, has been overused. But what I see a safe space as is someone to kind of be around other people like them and kind of get a break from having to be out in the world defending their identity and getting questions all the time about, well, what do you think about this? You're gay or you're black, you know, tell me what you think about this. So I think safe spaces in that context are really important, because there's that support within that group or that community to get a mentor, to get some advice, just to get some validation maybe for feeling a certain way, or knowing someone else has gone through the same problem and feeling like you're not alone, or you're getting that message that it gets better. So I think schools have a big part in this, but I think organizations and workplaces and community places can also take steps to be more inclusive. Have you heard of employee resource groups before?
Yeah, because there's like a lot of them for like, isn't it like for people with disabilities, and then one is like for the workforce center and stuff, to help you get that, if I'm right or am I wrong?
Yeah, it really depends. The bigger the organization, usually they have different groups, but they have them based on ethnicity or race or sexuality or gender. But I think they kind of play a role in having a little bit more power to speak up to authority if the people in power, the owners or the leaders of an organization aren't doing anything, and you see that something needs to change, or you don't agree with their viewpoint. Having the backing of a union or a employee resource group might make you fear less retaliation, because you get a bunch of people to sign something. Because there's strength in numbers. Like one voice can be powerful, but if you have other people echo that same view, that's important. But when you deal with minorities and how they're going to be included, you might not always have other people like you that are going to stand up for you or validate your views. But having a culture where at least you can feel physically and emotionally safe is important, right? Because businesses, they spend a lot of money recruiting and hiring people, and then if those people don't feel like they fit into that culture, they're probably not going to stay or be happy or be productive, right? If they don't feel like they can be themselves.
Yeah.
And it's not just, like we said, not always personal. It could be that you have a child with a disability, and in the workplace you hear discrimination, you heard the word retarded being used. You know, that can be scary to speak up, if it's to your boss, right? Or you know, maybe you're just withholding things about yourself, that maybe you're the parent of someone with a disability and providing a lot of support outside of your job, and maybe your boss is going to treat you differently because of that. That's more of that implicit bias that people might not know, but it is illegal to treat people differently because of that information that you might know.
But they still do it anyway.
Yeah. So trying to go back to these questions, I'd say the people responsible are going to be those people in authority. So holding those people accountable. Yeah, I don't think it's really about who should win. It's more about respect and not assuming someone's hateful from the get-go and adding fuel to the fire. Who causes harm? I think the media can cause harm, the ignorant, the biased, right? Because someone can say something and they can just be ignorant rather than biased, right? Ignorance, not knowing enough, right? So the intention's a little bit different. But yeah, there's a lot that can be done to advance social and emotional learning, which I think benefits everyone, because everyone is different and unique. And the more they feel like they can be themselves in the workplace, that's just going to make that more of a supported environment, right? I think that's what accommodations serve the purpose of, making something more accessible and inclusive. And if someone's living their day-to-day in fear of being a victim of discrimination, or every day in a culture where they feel like they can't be themselves, they're not going to be very productive. After, a crisis happens, some of their advice is to, listen to what's happening in the cafeteria, in the teacher's lounge, some of those backstage types of settings where people are a little bit more casual with their conversation, where you might hear more of that biased language. But I think the more we can engage people in being analytical of what they see in the media and using their critical thinking skills, making that more of a priority in education or other organizations, I think that can do some good, for sure.
There's a lot of, I keep thinking about how to help everybody to understand that we're all unique and different, and how to get along with each other, and doesn't matter. in a way, I kind of discriminate too. To be honest with you, I don't like people that smell really bad, and and that makes me, I guess, judgmental. Like how often you take a shower or bathe yourself and stuff. So I can say that I'm biased, very biased about that, because if I get up and do it, you should do it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still working on that.
Yeah, well, that's respect, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that's also a top thing from your parents should teach you more about hygiene. Maybe some people don't know about, how to take care of themselves either. But,
Yeah, offensive odors in the workplace, like even perfumes, people can overdo it with their cologne or something. And for someone who has, who's neurodiverse, maybe has different sensory issues, that can really play a role. So we've got to be forward thinking and considering the experiences of all, and how something like that can present a challenge for someone with a disability, and they might not have disclosed their disability at that point, and that could be a deal breaker for their employment, because they don't want to disclose and they can't get their work done because someone's got the newest fragrance being pumped into their cubicle.
Yeah, I can't stand when you can tell when a guy overdoes his cologne, and that kills me too.
There's a lot of people, like, there's obviously businesses on, like, the 6th Street Mall, but there's a lot of times there are men and women that, like, dress up, they can tell they overdo it. I mean, I don't like it either, but I kind of just ignore it. But it's just hard to sometimes.
Yeah.
And you have to go to got moved to another part of the room, but then sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes I overdo it, so when I put on perfume, I put it on like 3 or 4 hours before I'm leaving, so it could just mellow out, and then so it won't be too much, because I'm paranoid, because I used to be teased about that didn't smell that great either. So that's been my self-conscious about, do I have enough? Do I feel okay or something? Smell okay? But it's just that's just a little bit of my insecurities.
Yeah, and that's the role of HR though, are to fix those problems, human resources, because people who have strong body odor, that's not like, I don't think we need to be inclusive of those people. I don't know. I think though it's getting people to maybe realize how they can be offensive even in the way that they spray themselves in the morning. Like that can be offensive in itself. It's not even language, it's just, well, maybe you like the smell, but someone else, like, it's really impacting their work. So HR, that's their role, is to remedy that problem. But again, not every business is going to take the initiative, so it might be up to you to speak up in that moment where you feel like you're being personally offended by something like body odor, but one piece of advice in this was to apologize before you say something, to warn that person, to prepare them mentally for the critique, because that helps with the learning, right? Where you're not saying, oh damn, like you really smell, like go take a shower, right? That can add more fuel to the fire, so to speak, rather than, I'm sorry, but that fragrance is really giving me some trouble focusing. Right. So it's how we say things and how we speak up is really important.
Yeah, it's also hard to tell because, some people are allergic to certain perfumes and body sprays and so on. But we really don't know that until the person actually says something. But then you walk around feeling, oh, I'm sorry, I feel bad because you may be allergic to a certain thing that's in it
Hmm.
without knowing.
Yeah, I actually have worked with someone where those automatic air fresheners
Mm-hmm.
couldn't even walk into that building for an interview if they had those. So
Right.
I'd have to go in and figure out, what are the work from home opportunities? And like now with COVID, those are
Mm-hmm.
becoming more popular, that concept of working from home. But
Right.
a year ago, that was a huge barrier for someone with a disability where they have a autoimmune response to something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even think, but sure, we want the bathrooms to smell nice, but at the same time, we're excluding other people from working and being in those spaces unknowingly.
Would you consider like certain sounds that way too?
Like Christmas because she or like Christmas music or Christmas something. But um because she's Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like not a lot of people want to hear Christmas music,
Yeah.
even though because some of them don't celebrate Christmas and they don't, and it's just you just have to be very like kind of mindful about it. I mean, you could actually try to when you do a holiday thing, try to do maybe look up some Hanukkah music and whatever to play around,
Yeah,
something like that. That's
right.
what I'm thinking about.
To be diverse in our selection of like the
Mm-hmm.
content, right? I think too, maybe Brittany, you were more speaking to like the sensory environment of just having
Yeah,
music
like picking
played in
up the loud
general.
pieces. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a part of it too. Cause we work with the girl named Allie. She's really, she's autistic, but most of them are like sensitive to like loud noises. So we kind of have to keep the noise down a little bit. Even for you, Jocelyn, that it's like, you was telling me that loud sounds, hurt your ears and stuff. So we kind of
Yeah,
have to be sensitive to that too.
mm-hmm.
yeah. It's more of the
Work,
it's more of the head.
yeah.
The head. Yeah, the ear too. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, my bad. You're right. Sorry for that. My bad.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just now since I have two, it's my world has changed a lot. I used to love to go clubbing and partying and stuff and listen to loud music in the car. Now I can't do it because it gives me a headache now.
Mm-hmm. So I think places, they don't even know that they're being biased or not inclusive because they're playing music, and that could be overstimulating to a customer or an employee. So I think these are all good things to consider, but I think it is, that's a good example of where the factor of the discrimination is ignorance rather than hate, right? Because we're not playing music because we don't like people who don't like music or can't work around music. It's more we
Yeah.
don't know that it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the key, is to like opening people up to realizing that there are things that we can be doing to be more inclusive, and sometimes we just have to ask,
Right.
um, or put those groups in place that can provide a voice for someone who is afraid of coming out, um, or disclosing something, um, with the fears if the culture isn't supportive from the start.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome.